It started as a throwaway weekend plan. Just two friends burning time on an empty calendar. We were in the middle of a week-long road trip, no real destination. Just two guys, a borrowed tent, and a checklist of state parks and national forests. Off-the-grid adventure. Something to shake the boredom off. That morning we were hiking through a section of forest that wasn't even on the main map. Just a logging road that bled into brush and trees. A ranger at the visitor center mentioned it offhand, said it was quiet country, which sounded perfect. About 3 miles in, the trail thinned, less dirt, more moss, barely anything left of a path. We were talking about lunch, arguing over trail mix versus actual food, when I tripped on something metal sticking out of the ground. It was a hatch, round, rusted, almost perfectly flush with the forest floor. If it hadn't been for the slight edge and the fact that I landed on it hard, I don't think we'd have noticed it at all. At first we thought it was some old septic tank lid, or maybe a drain cover from when the area had been surveyed years ago. But the more we cleared away, the weirder it got. There was no label, no ventilation. Just a solid iron door and a thick, shiny padlock that looked brand new, like someone had put it there last week. We both crouched over it, trying to make sense of it. I remember saying, "Who the hell is locking up random forest ground like this?" My buddy Greg made some joke about Cold War bunkers, but his laugh was nervous. We were both uneasy. There's something about seeing metal where only dirt and trees should be. It throws your sense of place off balance. We left it alone. Took a few photos. Marked the GPS just for fun. We didn't talk much the rest of the hike. Later that night, around the fire, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The hatch. The untouched padlock. The way the moss around it had been pulled back recently. Like someone had opened it. Or planned to. Greg waved it off. "Dude, it's probably a hunting cache or a root cellar. There's a million of those in forests like this." I didn't believe him. The next morning he wanted to head north, check out a nearby lake. I told him I was going to loop back, just for an hour, just to take another look. He thought it was weird, but didn't argue. So I packed light and hiked out alone. The forest was still. Even more so than the day before. No birds, no wind. Just that heavy pressure cooker quiet that makes your skin prickle. When I got to the hatch, I stopped cold. It was open. The padlock was gone. Not broken, not tossed aside, just gone. The hatch itself had been swung open like the top of a submarine. It creaked slightly, one hinge rusted through and bending under its own weight. I stood over it, heart pounding, trying to decide if I should run or look. Curiosity won. I pulled out my phone. No signal, of course, but the flashlight still worked. I shined it down. Concrete walls, metal ladder, a narrow tunnel below, just wide enough to crawl through. But what got me was the dirt on the first rung of the ladder. It had been kicked off. Someone had gone down, recently. I snapped a photo. Flash on. And that's when I saw them. Footprints, in the dust at the bottom of the shaft. Boot prints, leading away from the ladder and deeper into the tunnel. No second set leading back. I didn't go down. I want to say that clearly. I didn't go in. I almost did, but something told me if I crossed that threshold, I wouldn't come back out. I took one more picture, shut the hatch, marked the spot harder in my GPS this time, and I left. Ran, actually. Greg thought I was messing with him when I told him. But when I showed him the photos, his face changed. He didn't say much after that, just nodded. Said maybe it was time we headed back toward civilization. 2 nights later, I woke up to a knock on my window. We were staying at a cheap roadside motel. Greg was asleep. It was 2:14 a.m. I sat up and looked through the curtain. There was a man standing in the parking lot, too far to see clearly, just standing, facing the room. I didn't move, didn't open the curtain all the way. Eventually, he walked off. I didn't sleep again that night. When we checked out the next morning, I looked for footprints under the window. There were some. Boot prints. Same shape, same tread, and just one set, going toward the window, not away. We had this trip planned for a while now, a reset weekend, to completely disconnect from life back home. No phones, no deadlines, no notifications. Just two friends, a borrowed tent, and a stretch of forest we'd both been meaning to explore since last summer. The plan was simple: hike in 6 miles, find a clearing near the creek, camp for 2 nights, and hike back out before Sunday evening. We brought freeze-dried food, a solar charger for my camera, and one emergency phone, off, unless we needed it. The hike in was perfect: cool air, light breeze, no other hikers. We set up camp in a small clearing off the main trail, secluded but not remote. A small fire ring suggested others had been there, but not recently. The first night, we cooked, talked, and took some photos. Stars over the tree line. Our tent with the firelight casting shadows behind it. Normal stuff. At some point, I set the camera inside the tent, near the corner of my sleeping bag. We slept hard. The second day was more of the same: hiking, photos, sitting by the creek. We didn't see a single other person the entire weekend, and for once, that felt like a good thing. We packed out early Sunday morning. The forest was quiet, maybe too quiet in hindsight, but neither of us thought much of it at the time. It wasn't until we got home that things started feeling wrong. We dumped gear, ordered greasy food, collapsed on the couch to scroll through the camera roll. It started fine. Blurry shots from the hike, goofy trail selfies, firelight portraits. Then the creek, the tent at sunset, more stars. Then one shot froze us. We were both in it, asleep, in our sleeping bags, inside the tent. The angle was off, low, from the side, like someone crouched just inside the door and aimed the lens toward us. My mouth was slightly open. His hand was resting on his forehead. Both of us unconscious. The timestamp said 2:43 a.m. Neither of us had taken that photo. The silence in the room got heavy. I tapped to the next image. Same scene, slightly different angle. Like whoever took it had shifted a few inches. Next photo. Closer. You could see my friend's backpack in the corner. My water bottle. My hand, clutching the edge of the sleeping bag. And just barely. The edge of a shoulder. In the lower left corner. Covered in a dark jacket. Holding the camera. I dropped the phone. He grabbed it, scrolled backward, forward, zoomed. Same shoulder, same half-visible arm. In all, there were 6 photos like that, all taken between 2:40 and 2:51 a.m. None of them we remembered. None of them should exist. We hadn't heard anything. No zipper, no movement, nothing. We checked the rest of the roll. Everything after those photos was normal again. Our hike out, the trailhead sign, selfie with the car, whoever it was, they didn't take anything. They didn't leave a note. They didn't wake us up. They just came in, watched, took photos, and left. The idea that someone had been inches from my face while I slept, without me knowing, made my skin crawl. We filed a report the next morning, brought the photos to the ranger station. The guy behind the desk looked at us like we were trying to prank him. He said no one else was registered in the area that weekend. No solo hikers, no groups, no reports of suspicious activity. He asked if we staged it. When we said no, he said he'd make a note. And that was it. We haven't heard anything since. But I still check my doors twice before bed now. Sometimes 3 times. Because here's the thing. The last photo, the one we almost didn't see because it looked like a repeat, was different. If you look close, just past my friend's sleeping bag, near the flap of the tent, there's something. 2 fingers, barely visible, resting on the fabric, like someone braced their hand there just before leaving. Only those fingers were too long, too pale, and missing a fingernail. We tried to convince ourselves it was a trick of the light, but deep down, we both knew better. Someone was in that tent. We never heard them unzip it, because they never had to. They were already inside. The mountains remember things. That was the first lesson my grandfather taught me when he took me hunting in the Weminuche wilderness. The way a scrap of fabric can snag on a lodgepole pine for decades. How bones bleach white but never disappear. I thought of him when we found the boot prints circling our campsite that morning, how they faced inward like someone had stood there watching us sleep. Our group of 8 had hiked 19 miles into the San Juan Range, far beyond where the trail faded into animal tracks. The map called this place Elk Park Basin, though we'd seen no elk, no park, just a bowl of stunted spruce trees clinging to granite at 11,200 feet. The kind of elevation where your lungs never quite fill and the cold gets inside your teeth. We'd been drinking whiskey around the fire when the forest went silent. Not the natural quiet of nightfall, but the abrupt hush of a held breath. The flames suddenly seemed too bright, our voices too loud. That's when the man stepped into the firelight. He wore no shirt despite the freezing temperature, his torso a road map of scars that gleamed like old wax in the flickering light. A rifle, an old Winchester Model 70, hung across his bare back, its blued steel swallowing the fire's glow. His jeans were caked with mud to the knees, and he smelled of wet earth and something metallic. "Evening," said Derek, our guide. His voice sounded frail against the silence. The stranger didn't speak. His eyes moved between us with methodical precision, lingering on each face a second too long. I noticed 3 things in that moment. His left pupil was dilated twice as wide as the right. His fingernails were black with what looked like old blood, and he wasn't shivering. Not even when the wind kicked up and sent sparks swirling around his bare shoulders. Rachel dropped her metal water bottle. It hit a rock with a clang that made us all jump. The man's head snapped toward the sound so fast I heard his vertebrae pop. For 10 heartbeats, no one moved. Then, without a word, he stepped backward into the darkness between 2 spruce trees. Not turning around, not breaking eye contact, just gone. We built the fire higher, passed around the whiskey with shaking hands, told ourselves he was just some hermit, some Vietnam vet gone bush. But when I checked my watch at midnight, the second hand had stopped at 11:47, the exact moment we'd first seen him. At 2:09 a.m., I heard the click. Not the snap of a twig or the rustle of fabric, the unmistakable metallic snick of a rifle's safety being thumbed off. It came from the tree line 20 yards north, where the moonlit granite gave way to blackness. Derek heard it too. I saw his hand creep toward his own rifle, his breath fogging in quick bursts. We waited. The stars wheeled overhead. Then, click. Closer now. 15 yards, due east. Rachel started praying under her breath. The fire had burned down to embers, and in the faint glow, I could just make out the vapor of our panicked breaths hanging in the air. Dawn took forever to come. When it did, we found the footprints. They encircled our tents in perfect concentric circles, the deepest impressions right beside each person's sleeping bag. Some were barefoot, long, splayed toes with high arches. Others showed the waffle pattern of military-issue boots. All faced inward. The Park Service found nothing when we reported it. But 6 months later, a backcountry ranger sent me a manila envelope with no return address. Inside were 3 things. A photograph of our campsite taken from the trees, dated the night before we arrived my missing watch, its crystal cracked at exactly 11:47, a single page torn from a field notebook. The handwriting was cramped but legible. They always think it's one man. They never count the shadows. Last week, I got a text from an unknown number. Just a photo of my current tent in the Collegiate Peaks, taken through the trees at night. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m. I leave for Alaska tomorrow. Some places, the mountains don't just remember. They watch back. Baker Lake had always been too still. Even on windless days, its surface held an unnatural calm, like a held breath. We should have taken that as warning enough. My wife Claire and I arrived at Horseshoe Cove Campground on a Friday afternoon, the kind of golden September day that makes you forget how quickly the Pacific Northwest turns. The bulletin board by the parking lot held the usual notices, fire warnings, bear sightings, and one missing person poster. Have you seen this man? The photo showed a hiker in his 50s, grinning beside a trail sign, last seen 2 weeks prior, according to the notice. Claire tapped the bottom line. Says he couldn't swim. Then he shouldn't have been near the lake, I said, and immediately regretted it. The words hung between us. sour as the algae bloom we'd passed on the hike in. We took our kayaks out at dawn. The water was glass, reflecting the surrounding peaks so perfectly that it disoriented the eye. Claire paddled ahead, her strokes barely causing a ripple. That's when the smell hit. Thick and meaty, like a butcher's shop in August. Dead fish? Claire wrinkled her nose. I shook my head. The stench intensified as we neared the swimming area, its buoy ropes sagging with neglect this late in the season. Then I saw it. One of the buoys sat lower in the water, its orange dome tilted at an odd angle. Something pale shimmered beneath the surface. At first, I thought it was a discarded trash bag. Then the current shifted. A hand. Fingers splayed as if reaching for air, the skin bleached and bloated. The rest materialized as we drifted closer, shoulders hunched forward, a head tipped back to stare eternally upward through 3 feet of lake water. The missing hiker. Claire made a sound I'd never heard before, half gasp, half retch. The body swayed gently, anchored beneath the buoy by what we'd later learn was a tangle of fishing line around its ankle. How many children had cannonballed off nearby rocks while this dead man watched from below? Park rangers arrived within the hour. As they hauled the body ashore, one of the younger officers vomited into the reeds. The coroner would later estimate he'd been there at least 10 days. "You're lucky you didn't touch it," the lead ranger told us. "Bodies in cold water can still carry—" Claire cut him off. "We know." That night, we heard the rats. Not the timid scratching of forest rodents, but something bolder. They moved through the underbrush with purpose, circling our tent in a rustling tide. Twice I shone my flashlight out the mesh window, catching only glimpses of matted fur and naked tails. At 3 a.m., Claire sat bolt upright. "They're not foraging," she whispered. The truth settled over me like the lake's chill. Animals that size didn't move in packs unless trained to, unless something had taught them to hunt together. We left before first light. As I loaded the kayaks, Claire stood frozen by the bulletin board. The missing person poster was gone. In its place, a fresh notice. Lake temporarily closed due to water quality concerns. No date, no signature, just those 5 words printed neatly above a smear of something dark and flaking at the corner. We didn't wait to ask questions. Some truths, like the things that live in deep water, are better left undisturbed. I moved to Eastern Oregon for work. The Wallowa Mountains loomed behind my cabin like a jagged spine, and as an obsessive hunter, I couldn't wait to scout the backcountry before season opened. I've spent my whole life reading the land. Grew up on a ranch in Idaho, tracking cougars by the time I was 12, learning to mimic wounded prey so well I could pull coyotes right to my boots. I'm not bragging, just saying, I know animal sounds. The rasp of a mule deer's cough, the chitter of a pissed-off squirrel, the way elk bugle in waves. I can tell you what's breathing in the dark just by the texture of its noise. But what I heard that night wasn't an animal. I'd hiked deep into the Eagle Cap wilderness, far past the trailheads where weekend hikers clogged the paths. Found a ridge with a sightline like a sniper's perch, perfect for glassing game at dawn. No fire, just a bivy sack and the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. Then at 1 a.m., pain split my skull open. It came in waves, throbbing, relentless, like something was inside my head, squeezing. I'd been chugging water all day, so it wasn't dehydration. I clenched my teeth waiting for it to pass when I heard it. A sound. Low, hollow, echoing down the slope above me. I froze. Not a bird, not a mammal. Too deliberate. 3 beats, a pause, then 3 again, like a goddamn signal. My gut twisted. I tried to blame it on some weird Oregon owl, but the rhythm was all wrong. Birds don't stay in one spot, don't pace their calls like a metronome. And it was getting closer. By 2 a.m., I couldn't take it. The pain in my head was a white-hot drill, and that sound was wrapping around my brain. I bolted. There was a gated logging road a mile north, longer route, but safer in the dark. Problem? The road curved toward the sound. It followed me. No matter how fast I hiked, it stayed 200 yards upslope, matching my speed. Twigs snapped, rocks clattered. My finger hovered over my rifle's trigger, but I never saw anything. That was the worst part. It knew how to hide. Then the headache stopped. The second I dropped below the tree line, the pain vanished, like something let go. The sound faded too, but the feeling didn't. Something had been hurting me. Back home, I scoured the internet, played every unknown animal noise clip until my speakers buzzed. Then I found it, a recording from the Olympic Peninsula. Sasquatch vocalization, the description said. I don't believe in that crap, never have, but I know what I heard. I went back once, walked the same ridge, silent as a ghost. Nothing, no sound, no tracks, just the wind and that itching sense of being watched. I don't hunt alone anymore, because whatever was up there that night, it wasn't just following me, it was waiting. Growing up in rural Nova Scotia, the woods were our playground. That summer of '98, my friends and I, 8 kids aged 8 to 12, fancied ourselves wilderness explorers. We'd venture further each weekend, pushing past the familiar stands of birch and maple into deeper, darker forest. The day we found the campsite started like any other adventure. We'd packed peanut butter sandwiches and juice boxes, our pockets stuffed with fishing line and hooks. The hill behind Old Man Henderson's property was our target, steep enough to feel daring, but still within shouting distance of civilization. Or so we thought. About 40 minutes into our hike, Michael spotted it first, a narrow path veering off the main trail. Not the ragged deer trails we knew, but something neater, deliberate. The packed earth showed recent boot prints. ATV track, declared Tommy, our self-appointed leader at 12 years old. We followed it like bloodhounds, the excitement of discovery drowning out the growing unease in my gut. The campsite appeared suddenly, as if we'd stepped through some invisible boundary. It was pristine in a way that made my skin prickle. 8 bed frames woven from fresh-cut saplings and pine boughs, arranged in perfect rows. A fire pit with wood stacked teepee style, ready to light. Even a crude bench carved from a fallen log. "It's like the Boy Scouts built it," whispered Sarah, her usual bravado gone. We joked nervously as we ate our snacks, naming it Fort Bloodbath, and daring each other to spend the night. The others left as afternoon shadows stretched long across the clearing, but I stayed. Something about the place called to me. The quiet, the order of it. I stretched out on one of the brush beds, staring up at the canopy. That's when I heard the snap. I sat up so fast my vision swam. The clearing was empty, silent. Then I saw it, 30 yards into the trees, something dangling from a low branch. At first I thought it was a deer carcass, left by hunters. I stood slowly, my legs vibrating with adrenaline. The shape was wrong. Too long. Too articulated. The afternoon sun glinted off something pale as I edged closer. 60 feet away, my brain finally made sense of the proportions. Legs. Arms. A head lolling at an impossible angle. I laughed. A high, reedy sound that echoed unnaturally in the still air. My mind threw up desperate explanations. A Halloween decoration, a scarecrow, anything but what my eyes insisted was there. At 50 feet, details resolved. Flesh the color of spoiled milk, a jaw hanging slack, revealing blackened teeth. One bare foot, toes curled inward like a dead spider. I took another step. The smell hit me then. Sweet and putrid, like roadkill left in the sun. My stomach heaved. The corpse's head turned slightly in the breeze, empty eye sockets staring right through me. I ran like all the devils of hell were at my heels. Branches whipped my face as I crashed blindly through the undergrowth. I found my friends halfway home, their laughter dying when they saw my face. At my parents' kitchen table, between gasping sobs, I described every detail. The way the skin had peeled back from the forehead, the strange dark stains on the tattered plaid shirt, the single work boot still clinging to the left foot. Dad grabbed his rifle and a flashlight. Mom called the RCMP. But when we returned at dawn, the clearing was empty. No beds, no fire pit, no body. The Mounties humored me for about 10 minutes before deciding it was a prank. But I know what I saw. To this day, I wake sweating from dreams of that clearing, of those empty eye sockets tracking me as I backed away. The Keweenaw Peninsula juts into Lake Superior like a broken finger, its spine of ancient basalt riddled with abandoned copper mines. Locals call it God's Forge, a place where storms brew faster than anywhere on Earth. We should have known better. My friends Matt and Jason had talked me into this late-season trip to the Porkies, Michigan's Porcupine Mountains wilderness. September in the UP usually means crisp air and maple leaves blazing red, but 1998 had been different. The lake never cooled that summer. Local Ojibwe elders muttered about Gitchi Gumi showing her teeth, and charter captains swapped stories of rogue waves swallowing lighthouses whole. First omen? The payphone at the ranger station spat static when I called Mom. Second omen. The sky turned the color of a fresh bruise by 4 p.m., though the forecast promised clear skies. We'd just returned from a hike to Lake of the Clouds when the wind shifted. Not the playful gusts that rustle aspen leaves. This was a living wind. It came from all directions at once, slamming our tent flaps like a poltergeist testing doors. Jason laughed it off until his beer can imploded in his hand, crumpled by invisible force. Then the megaphone voice cut through the gale. "Take cover! Tornado confirmed!" A Park Service truck careened down the access road, its light bars strobing blue through the flying debris. We sprinted for the concrete bathhouse with 6 other campers, a family from Green Bay, their toddler screaming over the thunder that now shook the earth. Inside smelled of mildew and fear. The single light bulb flickered as hail began its assault. Golf balls at first, then softballs, hammering the roof with such force that concrete dust rained down. Matt clutched my arm as a sound like the end of the world tore through the forest. Crack-thoom. An old-growth hemlock speared the ground outside, its roots clawing at the sky. The family's station wagon flipped onto its roof like a toy. Through the tiny window, I watched our tent dissolve, its shreds joining a cyclone of pine needles and cooler lids spinning into the black. Then the lights died. In the dark, someone sobbed. The toddler's wails rose to a pitch that seemed to anger the storm. The walls trembled as something massive impacted nearby. Maybe the picnic shelter, maybe a boulder flung from the ridgeline. Jason vomited in the corner. The worst part? The eye. At 1:17 a.m., my watch glowed in the dark. The wind stopped. Absolute silence. We stumbled outside to a nightmare. Trees snapped at 15-foot heights, their splintered trunks all pointing northeast. A cooler embedded vertically in the mud, like a tombstone. The air itself hummed, vibrating our fillings. The family's father whispered, "This ain't natural." He was right. When dawn finally came, the devastation defied logic. A 50-foot section of forest near the lake had been stripped bare. Not just knocked down, but sanded to naked bedrock. Rangers found Matt's sleeping bag 2 miles away in a birch tree, perfectly dry. The official report called it an F3 tornado, the first in the Porkies since 1896. But the Ojibwe maintenance worker who helped dig out our gear told a different story. Wendigos walk in storms like that. He pointed to the stripped zone. See how the trees are peeled, not broken? That's not wind. That's claws. I still have nightmares about the sound. Not the freight roar of the twister, but what came after. A high, wailing shriek that echoed across Lake Superior for hours. The NOAA said it was metal debris vibrating, but the old-timers at the Ontonagon Diner traded glances when we described it. Because everyone up here knows, some storms aren't storms at all. They're hunts. Every Wyoming kid learns the smell of wildfire young. That acrid, throat-closing stench of ponderosa pine sap boiling in bark. But in the summer of '83, when I was 12 and we camped in the Medicine Bow Mountains, I learned something worse. Wildfires can hunt. We'd chosen the campsite for its safety, a high meadow ringed by granite outcroppings, with a creek cutting through like a natural fire break. Dad was a volunteer firefighter in Laramie. He'd lectured us for weeks about defensible space and escape routes, but nothing could prepare us for what came at 2:17 a.m. I woke up choking. Not on smoke, on light. A hellish crimson glow pulsed against the tent walls, brighter than any sunrise. My little brother Cody stirred as I crawled over him, his sleepy grunt cutting off when I unzipped the flap. "Dad," I screamed. The mountain's on fire. Except it wasn't the mountain. Not yet. The glow came from the east, the wrong direction. Wildfires in Medicine Bow always rode the west wind up from Colorado. This one was creeping downhill, against all logic, like it had a destination. Dad emerged barefoot, his face gone slack. I'll never forget how his Adam's apple bobbed as he whispered, "Backfire." But who'd light one now? Then Cody, ever the Cub Scout, pointed north. The sun doesn't rise there. The realization hit us like a physical blow. That wasn't sunrise or backfire. The entire eastern slope was ablaze, flames leaping crown to crown in the beetle-killed pines. And it was moving fast. We packed in panicked silence. Mom folded the still warm sleeping bags, while Dad kicked dirt over the embers of our fire. The station wagon's vinyl seats seared our legs as we piled in. Through the windshield, the fire painted dancing shadows on Dad's face as he white-knuckled the wheel. "Remember," he said too calmly, "we're ahead of it." But as we fishtailed down the logging road, the fire changed. First aberration. The wind shifted 180 degrees without warning, sending a fire whirl spinning across our path. It sounded like a train derailing as it vaporized a deadfall. Second aberration. The flames began flanking us, not chasing, herding. Every turn we took, another finger of fire would sprout ahead, forcing Dad to brake hard enough to slam Cody into the dashboard. Then came the worst moment. As we skidded around a switchback, the headlights illuminated a figure standing in the road, a game warden in his green uniform, waving a flashlight. Dad almost sobbed in relief as he rolled down the window. The man's face was blistered, his uniform smoldering. He didn't speak, just thrust a charred map at Dad and pointed southwest. When his sleeve rode up, I saw the flesh underneath was unburned in perfect stripes, like something had shielded him with fingers, Cody whispered. The warden vanished before we could ask questions. We took his route, tires screaming as we plunged down a dry creek bed the map swore didn't exist. In the rearview mirror, the fire seemed to pause at the tree line, flames licking upward like a pack of wolves sniffing lost scent. We hit Route 130 as dawn broke. The real firefighters looked at our soot-streaked faces, and the station wagon's melted side mirrors like we'd crawled from a grave. "You're lucky," one said. "Fire jumped the highway behind you." But the warden who'd saved us? When Dad described him, the crew exchanged glances. Their radios crackled to life. Remains found in Station 12 burnover. Confirmed as Ranger Kowalski. Estimated time of death, 18 hours prior. I still wake some nights smelling that fire. Cody won't talk about the stripes on the warden's arm. And Dad? He took up drinking after that summer. Said he kept seeing Kowalski in his rearview mirror on lonely roads, always pointing somewhere deeper into the flames. Because out here, they say some fires don't just burn. They feed. And they remember faces.